Record, how Madison is responding a week after federal agents shot and killed a second U.S. citizen in Minneapolis.
Just helps to do something.
Plus, we're continuing to sit down with the candidates in the race for governor. This week, Madison State Representative Francesca Hong joins us. What is the role of a state government in regulating these AI data centers?
We have proposed a moratorium.
And later, several superintendents are asking the state legislature for more funding, why they're calling the need urgent, and how does it play into a $2.5 billion budget surplus. That's all coming up on For the Record.
Tough questions, real answers. Wisconsin's political conversations start here. This is For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Ellie LaLiberte. Well, several Madison businesses were closed Friday for an anti-ICE national shutdown. It comes nearly a week after federal agents shot and killed a second U.S. citizen, Alex Preddy, in Minneapolis. This was the scene at the state capitol as protesters demanded ICE should leave Minneapolis. We saw protests across southern Wisconsin this week, including on UW-Madison's campus.
I'm just really proud of my peers for coming out here when it's so cold, and I think this is really important, and I'm really angry, but I'm also so happy to see that so many people are here.
Wisconsin lawmakers are also responding. The state joined a filing in support of Minnesota's lawsuit that challenges President Trump's deployment of ICE and Border Patrol. Governor Tony Evers called federal agents' actions in the Twin Cities, quote, dangerous and unlawful. And Attorney General Josh Kaul joined 21 other attorneys general denouncing the administration's letter to Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, in which U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi demands a series of actions in exchange for withdrawing federal agents. And in Washington this week, Senate Democrats threatened to vote against funding the Department of Homeland Security, which would lead to a partial government shutdown. That included Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin. On Thursday, Senate Democrats and the White House struck a deal on a spending package that addresses the Democrats' concerns over ICE funding. We spoke with Baldwin about what changes she wants to see from DHS.
We are demanding an end to roving patrols. They should be going after violent criminals, as Trump said they would do, by getting warrants and executing those warrants, not roving our residential neighborhoods and schools and places of worship. They should be taking their face masks off and putting their body cameras on and identifying themselves.
On Thursday, Senator Ron Johnson took to X, writing, quote, Alex Preddy and Renee Good would be alive today if leaders like Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey hadn't encouraged them to go into harm's way. Adding later, quote, now the left is using the tragedies they caused to threaten a shutdown and block DHS funding. How depraved is that? At the White House, President Trump questioned why Minneapolis police weren't out protecting federal agents the day Preddy was killed. But is that the role of local law enforcement? Under the U.S. Constitution, local and state law enforcement cannot be required to participate in federal law enforcement operations. So when it comes to cooperating with federal agents, different departments can have different policies.
It's a mystery to no one that where the politics supports the administration, local entities like the police forces are eager to cooperate, and the opposite is the case in a place like Madison.
It's also left to local discretion because there is no statewide law creating a uniform policy. The race for governor is tightening. A day after Congressman Tom Tiffany got the endorsement of the president, Washington County Executive Josh Schoemann dropped out. Schoemann's campaign explained the decision, saying, quote, if we focus on the people of Wisconsin rather than fighting with one another, we can make Wisconsin the place to be, not just be from. And seen as a longtime Trump loyalist, Tiffany said he is honored to earn the president's endorsement, writing that, quote, as governor, I will make Wisconsin great again by lowering utility rates and property taxes, cutting burdensome red tape, rooting out waste and fraud, and restoring common sense leadership to Madison. Democratic lawmakers are moving to amend Wisconsin's constitution, working to create an individual fundamental right to privacy. Lawmakers say the amendment would protect Wisconsinites from government overreach and coercion. It would also shift the burden in court, requiring the government to justify how it had the authority to violate someone's privacy, rather than forcing individuals to prove the government did something wrong.
11 other states have privacy rights in their constitutions. Some states like Montana and Alaska, the privacy rights been interpreted to be stronger than the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is for unreasonable searches and seizures.
Democrats say they're hopeful Republicans will join them in supporting the amendment, a separate bill which would allow Wisconsinites to sue in state court when their constitutional rights are violated by state or federal officials, has been referred to committee. And speaking of money, state Republicans are proposing a new way to invest in Wisconsin kids. The proposed bill would give every eligible child born between 2025 and 2028 $1,000 in a federally established child savings account. This would match the $1,000 federal deposit. Supporters say even small family contributions could grow into seven-figure retirement savings.
Just with mom and dad skipping one quick meal or one small luxury a month lets their kids become a millionaire.
Republicans say they would tap into the state's billion-dollar surplus to fund the program. Well, you're probably familiar with the stop sign on the side of a school bus. Well, legislation moving through the Capitol would require cameras to be added, something the school bus administration says could help a shrinking workforce.
My first one, she took the buses for 2 years.
It's a sound Griselle Estoya is used to as she picks her 6-year-old up from school. But when her kids took the bus...
And I'm confident that my kids will be safe.
Keeping kids safe is the goal of the Wisconsin School Bus Association.
You want to make sure those kids are safe. You want to make sure you have the best drivers. You want to make sure that people know how to drive around a school bus.
The executive director lobbying at the Capitol on Wednesday for bills like this, requiring cameras to be on buses to catch people who illegally pass.
Getting the license plate is a real problem.
The author of the bill says it could help drivers who don't have time to document every violation.
So they would like this camera system to help them document.
They're pretty major and they keep our drivers.
Keeping drivers also a goal of the bus association.
They care about the kids. They want to be there. It's not because they're doing it for the money. It's because they want to have the relationships and stay involved in the communities.
The industry is facing both a shortage and an aging workforce. Licenses to operate a school bus are valid for 8 years, but under current law, those 70 and older have to retake their driver's test every 2 years. This bill would double that.
These other drivers, these are the ones who are, say, 65, 70, 75 years old, actually have lower incidence of problems. And so from that perspective, they're already actually safer than some of the other drivers that can get those licenses.
For Estoya,
I hope they figure it out.
She wants to make sure all parents have the option that school buses provide.
These bills are at different stages in the legislative process. To have a chance at becoming law, they'll need to pass both chambers before lawmakers break for the session by March. And next on For the Record, Madison State Representative Francesca Hong joins us. Find out how she aims to set herself apart in a large Democratic primary when we come back.
Welcome back to For the Record.
Thanks for staying with us. Well, we're continuing to sit down with the candidates in the race for governor. This week, we were joined by State Representative Francesca Hong. Hong entered the race on September 17th. She became the first Asian American elected to Wisconsin's state legislature in 2021 and represents much of downtown Madison, the east and north sides, and Maple Bluff. She's also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. But how is she working to separate herself from the large crowd in the Democratic primary?
I am the only single mom and renter, a working class champion, and I'm also a Democratic Socialist running on a Democratic ticket. But that means that my principles are rooted in democracy, human rights, and fairness.
And I want to talk about that too, because you are a part of that socialist caucus. How is that impacting your campaign?
I think folks are ready for change, to challenge the establishment, especially with young people and working class folks who are focused on the issues like permanent affordability and ensuring that we've got great opportunities, fully funded public schools in our state. And so it's less about labels and more about solutions.
But does it make you the most liberal candidate in this race?
I think liberal, progressive, the policies that are universal and meet the crises and the stress of what people are going through right now.
Hong's platform includes universal child care, guaranteed paid leave, constitutional protection of abortion rights, and expansion of Badger Care, Wisconsin's largest Medicaid program. I mean, the taxes have to go up to fund those programs?
We need tax fairness in our state, and so creating an additional bracket for some of the wealthiest to help us invest back into our local communities, especially local governments. The state has been hoarding money from local governments because we have a very skewed shared revenue system, and so I think more people want their taxes to go to things that they care about, especially investments in their local communities.
Another issue that could be prominent on the campaign trail includes AI data centers. Lawmakers in Madison are trying to figure out how to regulate the booming technology. A Republican-backed bill was quickly pushed through the assembly the other week, but the governor has signaled he likely won't support it. What is the role of a state government in regulating these AI data centers?
So we have proposed a moratorium on the construction of new AI data centers here in the state to make sure that we have more information on how data is being controlled, that we have more information about what sort of long-term economic impacts that this is going to have on our communities across the state.
Do you think that this moratorium could put a halt on some of the finances that people could see coming from these centers?
It's imperative that we fix this skewed shared revenue system that has made it so that the state is hoarding money that should absolutely be going back to our communities.
Campaign fundraising numbers also came out on January 15th. Hong sits lower in the pack, reporting about $369,000. How are you planning on building some of that momentum now?
We have over 7,400 individual donations, which is more than the next two candidates and their individual donations combined. This is a community-powered grassroots campaign, and this is a year where the many is going to beat the money.
What needs to happen for you in your campaign from now until the primary?
We have to continue to go to red counties, blue counties, the suburbs, the rural areas, meet with farmers, meet with small business owners, make sure that we're talking to teachers and care workers and childcare providers, the folks who are doing so much work for our state, but not seeing the investments and the benefits come back to their communities and to their wallets.
That was a condensed version of our conversation with Hong. To hear why she's calling for ICE to be abolished, you can find our full interview up right now on channel3000.com. And as we mentioned, the Democratic primary field is quite crowded. On your screen now are the candidates in the race on the Democratic side. The primary election is on August 11th, with the general taking place on November 3rd. And here are those Republicans running. As we mentioned earlier, Josh Schoemann dropped out this week, leaving Congressman Tom Tiffany and Andy Mansky. We have bios for each of these candidates up right now on our website. And next on For the Record, in a rare move, the superintendents of Wisconsin's 5 largest school districts got together and asked the state legislature for more funding. Why they're calling the need urgent when we come back. Welcome back to For the Record. Well, in a rare move, the superintendents of Wisconsin's 5 largest school districts, including Madison, are asking the state legislature for more funding. It comes as the state is reporting a $2.5 billion surplus at the end of this budget. Our Armand Rahman sat down with Madison's superintendent.
We just cannot continue to go this way.
That's what Dr. Joe Gothard and 4 other Wisconsin superintendents are saying in a letter written to state lawmakers. They say inflation has made feeding students, powering schools, and covering employee health care more expensive, but general state aid has not kept up.
Districts like Madison and many others have had to ask their local communities to fund public schools because the state hasn't done this for years.
Now in Madison, property owners did just see their taxes jump after approving $607 million in school referenda. While on track to help with MMSD operations for 4 years, Gothard says without enough replenishment and funding from the state, that money won't last long.
You know, we don't stay flat in terms of the money that we invest in our school system each and every year. It goes up by a certain percentage, whether that's staff salaries, whether that's the cost of utilities.
10% of MMSD's funding comes from general state aid, while districts in Green Bay, Kenosha, Racine, and Milwaukee get almost 70% of their costs from the state.
That is a huge discrepancy. Now, people will say it's because the property value in Madison is greater, which is true. But I can take you to schools in our community that are struggling to meet the needs of students, And I don't know that the equalization formula works for all students in Wisconsin.
Another formula educators say does not work, the special education reimbursement approved in the last budget, a fixed amount of 42%. But advocates say it uses old data and needs to be adjusted for when costs rise.
And for us, that translates into $3, $4, $5 million. And we're already subsidizing our Fund 27 Special Education Fund with $64 million.
Gothard worries if more is not invested into the state's schools, soon students may have to pay the price.
We always like to say that we'd like to keep it away from students. It impacts students, whether that be transportation route, whether that be some of the extracurricular activities, whether that be a little bit larger class size in one of our schools.
That was our Rahman Rahman reporting. Now, Governor Evers did recently propose a roughly $1 billion plan to provide property tax relief. To break down that plan and how it fits into the budget surplus, I sat down with the president of Wisconsin Policy Forum, Jason Stein. Where is that money coming from? Let's break that down for people.
Sure. Basically, the state already had a $700 to $800 million surplus going into this process, and then we just got essentially increased revenue projections, particularly in income and corporate income taxes. And so now none of this is money in the bank yet, because you still have to go through the budget process and see if the tax revenues come in as the new projections expect.
Is it a possibility for it to be lower than projected?
It could be higher, could be lower. For example, if the economy unexpectedly went into recession.
Political parties have mentioned they want to have some property tax relief. We saw the governor announce that plan, but I want to kind of paint this picture of what property taxes look like in Wisconsin. I know you guys have some research out about that.
We essentially found that overall gross property taxes should increase by something like 5% on the December tax bill. As far as school property taxes, those were up something like 7.8%, which was the most in more than 20 years.
In January, you released something that says that Wisconsin's tax burden was at an all-time low in 2025. What does it show us about 2026?
Right. So it is a little counterintuitive that we're seeing property taxes definitely going up by more than they have in most recent years. But at the same time, when we look at the tax burden, which is sort of taxes as a share of people's income, so, taxes as a share of people's ability to pay them, those are at an all-time low in the state and local. In the recent state budget, there was very significant income tax cuts that were approved back in July. And so, the state officials really prioritized income tax cuts over holding the line on property taxes. And so even though the local taxes are going up, that's being offset to some degree by what's happening at the state level.
And I mentioned this earlier in our conversation, but the governor is asking the state legislature to approve over $1 billion in property tax relief. How would that fit into the budget surplus?
What the governor wants to do, he wants to increase state aid. He wants to increase state property tax credits, which are essentially just money that the state pays local governments, and that the local governments then do not charge that to taxpayers. So it's sort of a dollar for dollar offset of what the local taxes are. And then he also wants to put some money into property tax relief that shows up as a line on people's income tax return, their state income tax return. So those are some of the big things that the governor wants to do. We have to balance that against the budget back in July. The best we thought then was that the budget was would spend more than $1 billion in the second year. It would spend more than $1 billion more than what the state took in revenue. And so, the state was going to go from like a $4 billion general fund balance, balance in its main set of accounts, down to like an $800 million balance. So now we're not going all the way down to $800 million. We're only going down to roughly $2.5 billion, but we're still going down. And that means why is that happening? It's because we're spending more than we're taking in, even with these additional revenue projections.
And I want to touch on this too, because I find it really interesting, and I think it might be kind of confusing for people to hear that we're spending more than we're taking in, but we have this huge surplus. And how do all of those puzzle pieces kind of fit together to tell the story?
Yeah, if you just want to think about it, you can have a family, they've saved up money over time, right? Let's say they had both parents working, they were both making a good income, and they saved up money over time. But then one of them cuts back on their hours at work, and they still have savings, but all of a sudden their expenses are greater than their income. So they still have savings, but now their savings are being reduced over time. And eventually that couple is going to have to do either that one of the parents is going to have to pick up more hours or another job, increase their income, or they're going to have to get that spending in line with what the income is now. So that's the position that the state is in.
Thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Hey, my pleasure.
That was a condensed version of our interview. You can find the full conversation up right now on channel3000.com. For the Record, we'll be right back.
You're watching For the Record with host Ellie LaLiberte.
Well, before you go, today marks the start of Black History Month. This past week, UW-Whitewater hosted an event celebrating Black history in Rock County. Attendees learned about local historical figures and Rock County's involvement in the civil rights movement. Speaking at the event was Living History for Wisconsin. News 3 Now's Jalen Banks caught up with the state's first Black Miss Wisconsin.
My grandfather, who's no longer with us, he was actually the first Black car dealership owner in the state of Wisconsin. And so him creating that history, my great-grandmother owning her house in Wisconsin, you know, those milestones got me to where I am today. So I try to always pay homage to them.
And that does it for us this week. A reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded interviews on our website, channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend. For the Record, I'm Ellie LaLiberte.
This has been For the Record